Hello and welcome to our latest Posturite webinar, Why Ergonomic Task Chairs Are an Asset Worth Investing in. I want to introduce you to Scott Bottomer. Scotty, as we were chatting this morning, reminded me that he's now been working for Posturite for 15 years this month. Uh, a mere whippersnapper compared to myself, but still, I think long service needs to be recognised. So with that in mind, and with your experience, Scotty, can you talk to us about ergonomic chairs and why we should be investing in them, please?
I'd love to, Catherine. Yeah, you should know that you were the first person I ever met in Posturite face to face. I can still remember the glass paneled office. And yes, you were very welcoming. So thanks very much for that. Yeah, lovely to see everyone. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you guys find some value in this. We're going to take this topic from a slightly different angle today, and really looking at the value that task seating can add. And also kind of help you guys navigate the internal conversations around this as well. So I am the head of furniture here at Posturite. So the furniture team are an addition to Posturite's core business, which is very much based around assisting individuals with musculoskeletal challenges. We take that same ethos, but expand it to the space as well as each individual, just to help make considered choices around that. So, yes, we're using the term ergonomic here, but this conversation is very much going to be looking at the seating asset as a whole, rather than individual one-on-one cases. But yeah, hopefully you guys still get something out of it. As we said, there's a Q&A at the end. So if there's any questions that come up during this slide presentation, please include them in that Q&A box, and we'll get them answered at the end, hopefully. So, just on top of today's agenda, it's very much about exploring the factors to consider during the seating selection process and what builds the whole story around a task chair. That can sound quite fluffy, but there is an awful lot of value in there. So with that, we're going to look at we're going to take and discuss what good looks like, and talk about the impact that better options can have on the business as a whole. So what value can task chairs add? What makes a particular task chair a good choice? What features does it have? What's the story behind it? We're going to do a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis just to take away some of the stigma around what cheaper chairs or more expensive chairs, how they might be viewed within a business, and then talk about what those decisions will ultimately, what impact they'll have on the business, both in terms of benefits and additional costs moving forward, from the perspective of the people who are using them, the staff, the company's biggest asset, the employer, procurement, and the sustainability story, which is very much a conversation that's coming up more and more. And it's a factor that an awful lot of the furniture industry are essentially building their model around. So we'll take a bit of a deeper dive into that and things to consider when discussing sustainability. And yeah, then it's about maximizing the investment and how do we make best use of the things we've just bought. So yeah, hopefully that's going to be of value to you guys today. Next slide, please. Excellent. So yeah, what value can good task chairs add? First and foremost, the people, as I mentioned, are the most important part of any business. So can task chairs enhance the workplace, the culture and output of the business by making those individuals or keeping them healthier, assisting to their well-being at work, and making them feel productive, valued, included? A potential applicant come in and look at the way that workplace is presented, and will that potentially impact the sorry, I may have internet issues, so sorry if that popped out there. I'll take this back 5 seconds. Yeah, does a potential applicant who comes back in to a business, does how the office look, particularly the chairs that are included in there, which are the most adjustable part of any workstation, will that potentially impact how they feel about the potential job that they're going for? Can that task chair contribute to the CSR objectives as a business? We've mentioned sustainability there. can the stats and accreditations really back up the story that the business are trying to tell? And then finally, can the chairs that we select save on resource, time, effort, money? We'll explore that as we kind of go on. Okay, next page. So what makes a good task chair? Now, I would say that because we're very much involved in the seating selection process with most organizations, we do see how these conversations start, and there's very much a focus usually on base function, I should say, which, to be honest, on paper can be very similar with an awful lot of chairs, price, and aesthetics. And they seem to be the majority of kind of starting points for the queries that we get. But there is an awful lot more to consider around that topic. They should be considering factors into their new product development to make sure that they have the best offering possible. So what makes a good task chair? Function and adjustability is, like we said, probably the most common one. We tend to look towards core adjustments that allow individuals to be set in the most appropriate position possible for their body, their anthropometric makeup. How do we set them in a position that will allow them to work healthily, get fresh oxygenated blood to the brain, but also keep their musculoskeletal health in order? Adaptability. Can we change that task chair in any way to accommodate for users of maybe of a smaller stature, larger stature? Is a neck rest required? Is there a requirement for a coccyx cutout for individuals with coccydynia? Or can we maybe put softer seat pads on? All of these things are ways in which we can adapt an existing model in situ to make them more appropriate for individuals without the need for a completely different reactive chair. Appearance. Not only does it fit within the design brief of that office, although that is very much a contributing factor, what does the appearance of that chair say about the organization? Does it present it as a forward-thinking, innovative space? Does it present an image of a traditional office work style? Is that going to appeal to potential applicants? Again, a consideration to make. Falling on the DSE regs here, is it appropriate for the user using it? Again, we can mitigate that by making sure that the selection is considered for using European anthropometric data. We can determine whether or not that chair is likely to accommodate the greatest percentage of our staff. But also we can back that up with the internal DSE assessments that we do as well, just to make sure that it's appropriate. That should also be a consideration when it comes to trials as well. The number of trials the breadth of the trial will very much determine how successful it's going to be, and that's taking into consideration. But is it a fixed workstation where everyone tends to work at the exact same place, of which you might be able to lean towards a chair that's more adjustable, because once it's set for the individual using it, there's a very small percentage chance of someone else coming in and needing to tweak their chair because it's kind of a set workstation. Or is it a touchdown hot desking space where individuals are using those chairs for 2 hours at a time, of which you may not want to ask the staff members to have to adjust a chair with 7 core adjustments, let's just say, figure at the top of the air. And you may want to go for something that's more automated and requires less interaction with the item to get it comfortable for the end user for that short period of time. Durability, build quality, and availability of parts. This is always a really tricky one to do because obviously you've not experienced more often than not, you've not experienced the lifespan of that chair and kind of been subject to the durability credentials of it. It used to be that you could rely, and to a degree you still can, you can rely on the build quality, the warranty of the chair to kind of be indicative of the manufacturer's trust that it's going to last that period of time. So if a chair has a 10-year warranty, 15-year life expectancy, you can be pretty confident that it'll last that period of time. If it's a 2-year warranty chair, that might be an indication that it's potentially not going to be as durable as some other options on the market. Um, I've mentioned availability of parts there because I think that's often viewed as what's the word? An added extra, but it can really be an issue. If you've got chairs that are breaking, let's say it's year 3 of a chair with a 5-year life expectancy. If those availability of parts are not available, let's just say you've bought an entire imported unit from an area where it might be more geographically economical to manufacture that chair, and there aren't a list of component parts available in the UK to be able to get those out to you ASAP. You essentially have to buy a whole new chair. So there's a cost implication to that. There's also a sustainability impact to that as well. Whereas if you've got a UK manufactured product, or a product that is, let's say, from Scandinavia, Germany, Italy, Portugal, but they have a base within the UK, then the parts are often able to get shipped out significantly quicker. So it's something to just consider when you are making those choices. Sustainability is key. I won't dwell too much on sustainability here because we've got a dedicated slide to it in terms of what to look for. Sustainability is a challenging river to navigate because it's very much become a buzzword. It's similar to ergonomic, actually. It's there is a picture that can be built around sustainability that has a number of different factors and components. We'll go into that. There are a number of products that, compared to others, may not be considered as sustainable, but they still use the sustainable tag, which again I'll get to later on. But it is worth noting that there is some variance between the strength of a sustainable build quality as well. You have, and finally, you got your supporting resource as well. So things like things that I always consider are there to assist with the day 2 aspects of it. So we've got things like setup videos, setup PDFs, an awful lot of the manufacturers who are premium in nature, which we'll discuss in a second, have learning resources available on their website that talk about the ways of working and the environments of which their products are used that can be of real benefit moving forward. Lovely. Next slide, please. So we often get the question of cost, and how do I say this? So there's a reluctance to go past a particular point because a budget has been allocated to that product. To that project, and we can't go above it. We always view it as the cost of an asset that keeps on giving to the business. How do we compare apples with apples here? And rather than framing the conversation as a year 1 outlay, how can we look at it in terms of a maintained asset across a particular period of time? I've chosen the 15-year window for this because most of the premium brands have a 10-year warranty. And with that, they then have an expected life expectancy of 15 years. So I've used that as kind of the basis of this calculation. So when we consider the purchase of an asset across that time period, it can be considered much more viable than if we just consider what is a year 1 chair versus what's a £200 chair versus a £750 chair, which is quite a difference in price in terms of unit cost. What does that actually look like over that window? So next slide, please, I think. Yeah, let's go ahead and look at those 2 scenarios. So if we're we're going to do we're going to do a bit of an exercise here where we look at the seating selection process. Let's say in this hypothetical situation, there's a need to replace 200 task chairs on a site of an organization. They're currently spending around 30,000 a year on reactive seating. And by reactive seating, I mean day 2. An individual has been assessed. It's been determined that the equipment that is currently on site doesn't meet their existing requirements. How do we put in place something that does? And that is, that's Posturite's core business. So hopefully most of you guys will be familiar with that aspect of what we do. But how can we use the reactive, sorry, how can we look at this, the standard seating option as a way to potentially reduce that number by investing in that requirement ahead of, sorry, from year one? Okay, next slide, please. So let's look at a little cost benefit analysis scenario. So we've got task chair A, and this is, let's call it a lower quality chair, of which there's no improvement on the chairs that are currently in situ. Versus task chair B, which is of a higher quality and a significant improvement. So things that may be considered under a task chair A, you typically look at a lower warranty. Let's say in this particular scenario, that's 2 years. And again, this is no real science, but let's say the expected life usage of that chair is 5 years, which is potentially a little bit generous, considering the warranty is 2 years. But let's take that anyway. The functionality and adaptability for reasonable adjustment cases are fairly low. Reliability is low, and there's no added value in terms of the sustainability story. Versus task chair B, and the initial cost of that is around £200. Let's say it's an import chair, again, where we've got a box arriving in the UK and able to be shipped out from there. Task chair B, we're looking at the more premium options here. So let's say it's a 10-year warranty for 8-hour use, expected life usage of 15 years, a high degree of functionality, a high degree of adaptability, which means not only can we set that chair up appropriately for individuals, but we also have the ability to maybe change out a seat pad. So it's an XL seat pad instead of a standard, or perhaps it's got a coccyx cutout, or a higher back instead of a medium back, let's just say. Reliability is high, so there'll be little to no in the ways of needing to repair that product if, again, treated appropriately in that space. And the sustainability story is high. But the initial cost there might be £750. Again, ballpark figures. Next slide, please. Lovely. Okay, so the way I've broken this down is I've looked at it in 5-year chunks. So theoretically, within that 15-year window, you will need to replace task chair A 3 times. And that's not, the figures here aren't including inflation or the cost of manufacturing prices go up, which seems like it won't happen very often, but over the past 5 years, it absolutely has by a significant amount. But let's look at what that looks like. So if we're buying 200 chairs every 5 years at £200, the total unit price over that 15-year window is well, 120,000 in comparison to task chair B, where we only have that outlay in year 1 of those 15 years. So the total unit price over those 15-year period is 150,000. So yes, it's still higher on task chair B, but not by as much as you would initially expect, considering that initial unit price. When we then factor in the additional costs on top of that, for example, removing of the existing chairs in that space every 5 years, and the ethical disposal price of that, which currently at the moment sits around about £25 a chair. You can go slightly less expensive and have less of a stringent sustainability requirement for that. But if we're committing to zero to landfill, then £25 a chair for an order of 200 is about right. So with that, you can add £15,000 for those 600 chairs of the 15-year life period on task chair A, whereas that would only be 5,000 for task chair B. Where the real impact is on reactive seating. You'll remember from the previous slide that we're spending about 30,000 a year on reactive seating for the quality that we're currently sat at. So with no improvement, we could expect that to stay the same, if not slightly increase with inflation. But let's say it stays the same, then 30,000 over a 15-year period is £450,000. Let's put my math to the test here. Whereas if we improve the standard of chairs, we're expecting that cost to come down significantly. Now, we have done this in real time with real organizations, and we've seen the impact that, because we're also responsible for the reactive aspect of what that company does, we've seen the impact of chairs of a similar quality impacting the reactive requirements. So let's say that the reactive cost then goes down to 5,000 per annum. from the 30,000, which is more than that will allow you the odd bariatric case per year, or perhaps it's a maternity case where a very particular chair is required, or perhaps you have a new start that requires assistance from a seated position to a standing, so you need an electrically height adjustable chair, for example. That 5,000 is probably 3 or 4 of those reasonable adjustment cases. So we're looking at 75,000 per annum, sorry, 75,000 in total over that 15-year window for reactive seating. So if we actually look at those 15-year windows, task chair B becomes significantly less expensive and all. Doesn't factor in things like, in fact, if you pop up to the next slide, please, Tom. Actually, yeah, so this doesn't factor in the following aspects of this as well. The costs are, or let's frame it in a positive way, the benefits this can have to people, the employer, the procurement, and sustainability by selecting options that you don't need to replace every 5 years, by selecting options that are appropriate for the user, appropriate for the task, contribute to the sustainability story of that organization. Okay. Lovely. So yeah, I mean, the benefits of appropriate that impact and how it can positively affect the health of individuals, how that can then positively impact the productivity of those individuals, how willing they are to come to work and enjoy what they're doing when they're not sitting in discomfort on inappropriate seating. Also, what connection does that then give that individual if they are to the organization that they're working for? Do they want to come into their work? Do they want to be comfortable? Do they want to look at the chairs around them and go, this space looks incredible. We've done it, like, I want to be here. I want to contribute in this area. And with that, the feeling of being valued that comes with it, the cultural benefits that can have to an organization. Okay. From an employer, again, you've got your most costly and important asset, your staff, being as productive as they possibly can be because they're comfortable, because they're not fidgeting, they're not needing to take additional breaks to stimulate blood flow. We still very much recommend that regardless your musculoskeletal health, you're still taking plenty of breaks for all of the benefits that come with that. But again, productivity is a huge benefit to the employer. You'll have reduction in reasonable adjustment cases. Or at least even if you do have the presence of those musculoskeletal challenges, you will have appropriate equipment within that space to help overcome those issues, and there'll be less of a need for a day two purchase. Attractiveness to candidates, like we said, it's becoming increasingly important to organizations to attract and retain staff. Our jobs are becoming much more multifaceted. The environment is extremely competitive. And what a workplace says about an organization is, on our understanding and the data that we're receiving, an increasingly pertinent point with those candidates. More efficient, streamlined purchasing, which we'll get to in a second, and more robust sustainability credentials. They're able to select products that are sustainable in nature in terms of their component makeup, materials used, but also in terms of the fact they don't have that additional waste. They're not replacing the chair additional 400 units. They're not requiring on the delivery and install requirements of those with the travel associated with it. They're not needing to, again, I'm stealing from the next slide. So more robust sustainability credentials. Let's leave that one there and move on to the next slide. Yeah, procurement. So reduced need for internal audit. I'm sure you guys have gone around and gone, who needs new chairs? And you've got that walk through trying to determine what the kind of the condition status of each chair. We do this as well within Posturite, where we do an audit process and green light, we traffic light it. So green means it's fine. Amber means that there's an aesthetic fault, but it's not enough for it to be taken out to consider circulation. And a red fault, which means it's critical and it really should be either replaced or fixed. But that takes a lot of work. Determining where the organization should put those resources in terms of the budget allocation. If we've got broken chairs across the entirety of the estate, which area gets it first? Does that potentially cause some friction internally? That conversation is going to be escalated and expedited the more frequently we need to replace those chairs because of durability challenges. Reduce time and money in exploring and communicating with the market. A seating selection process can take a little bit of time. And if you're navigating between multiple different suppliers, different conversations with manufacturers, then there's a good couple of months worth of conversations to be and meetings to be had there, all of which are time and resource. It's why it's important to get it right first time and hopefully do it as infrequently as possible. And yeah, reduce delivery and installation orchestration. It can take quite a bit of work to make sure that schedule is appropriate, and you're not having to tell staff, maybe don't come in on Friday and Monday over the next week because we've got an install happening. Come in after that on Tuesday, work from home just now, all that kind of stuff. It can have an impact. Next slide, please. Some of you might be familiar with the term greenwashing. Sorry, my internet may have cut out. Hopefully I'm back now. So yeah, you may be familiar with the term greenwashing. Essentially, sustainability has just become a very important topic, and it's been picked up by the furniture industry, amongst pretty much all the industries actually. But it's very much a consideration now, and there's been a real focused effort within the industry to look at the products that they're putting out there, the components and raw materials that are used to make them, the distances those products need to travel, and the energy use that surround the whole subject. So some have the credentials to back that up, is essentially the best way to look at it. So one way of doing that is selecting products with an EPD statement or an environmental product declaration statement that will fully break down the content of the product, the recycled content percentage and weight, the recyclable content at the end of life, the amount of energy that was required during the manufacturing process, the amount of energy required to get that to where it needs to be. Let's say it's a Scandinavian product that needs to come into the UK. They will do the projection on that. And also the amount of waste throughout that process as well, and the impact that has, and what is done with that waste at the end of the manufacturing process. The EPD statement of a chair will break all of that down. It's typically done by an independent body rather than the manufacturer themselves, which is another good sign that it's met the requirements independently. Some of the other sustainable options may not necessarily go to that degree of detail within their marketing. So it's worth looking out for. There's also awards in this area. So things like Green Guard Gold, Mobile Factor, Blue Angel, Green Dot, Seal, Eco Label, Cradle to Cradle, all of which are independently adjudicated and awarded for products that are exemplary in that area. And then finally, you got product features as well. So just because, I mean, any chair can be submitted to EPD statement, the strength of its results vary, but any product can be put forward. But there are particular features that make a chair more sustainable rather than just the content that it's made out of. You can have things like a commitment to zero glue staples. So you've got things like drawstring technology around upholstery components. You've got replaceable upholstery, so you can pop on, pop off pads. So rather than having the need to replace a whole chair if you get worn upholstery, which is more often than not one of the main challenges we get with chairs that fall into that amber category of aesthetically damaged, but not enough to take them out of circulation. Instead of having to require a technician to drive out to replace those pads, a number have just created a system that allows you to do that on site, all of which contribute to that sustainability story. Okay, next slide. So yeah, when it comes to maximizing the investment, it's yeah, it starts from the beginning, to be honest. It's about making sure we get it right first time. And that comes with consideration and guidance from experts. So we like to think we're in a very good position to do that. We are an independent supplier, which means we've got access to essentially the entirety of the market. I always get made fun of internally because of how much attention I pay to manufacturers' developments and new features that are available, new awards, new assessment criteria in terms of what tests particular chairs need to go through. Um, but yeah, it's about uh, having assistance with guiding you through each of those initial criteria that we talked about on slide 3 or 4, I believe it was, which again you can see. I believe the slides were sent around prior to this, but they'll also be sent around afterwards as well. And talking you through what the implications of that are and how they then allocate to particular manufacturers and choices. There's give and take in each category, but it's about understanding what's important to you as a business and in terms of that particular space as well. You might have one chair in area A and a completely different chair in area B because they function differently. And in order to accommodate for them appropriately, there needs to be a slight variance in the product selection. But yeah, utilizing the resource that you have and seeking independent guidance as to what option best meets your needs is the best advice I could possibly give. But yeah, selecting functionality that's appropriate for the space task, and I say staff training there. What I mean by is the degree of which they need to interact with that product on a day-to-day basis. Is it short and sweet work where they're only going to be using it for an hour at a time? Or is that going to be their chair of which they need to know how it can change as their requirements change? Audits and maintenance I've mentioned already. It's something we can support on, but it's something you can do internally as well. But just making sure that the asset that you've purchased is performing the way that you expect it to. Have you bought a very good ergonomic chair, but because of the way it's been treated in a particular area, on year 7 out of 15, there's some negative murmurings as to these chairs are falling apart. This is a ridiculous. Like we need some kind of change. By keeping on top of the audit and maintenance schedule, that can very much overcome those challenges without the need to replace your chairs. And then finally, an end of life process. What's the plan when those chairs have passed that 15-year life expectancy? Is it issuing them out to staff? Is it ethical disposal? Is it upcycling? Are we maybe want to use as a different area once they've been reupholstered? Is it donation to a charitable initiative? All of which, if you map this out from the beginning, it can very much inform how much value that can then add to the next stage of what you're trying to do. There's some really good stories that can be told of end of life that contribute to ISO accreditations, but also contribute to the PR initiatives. And again, just the general CSR aspects of a business. Okay, I think that's it. I'm sure I've missed points, but hopefully they will come up in the Q&A.
Thank you, Scott. Whilst you just grab a glass of water or whatever else, I've just got a
Mm,
few thoughts whilst you were talking. You know me, I always my thoughts.
mm.
Um, I was thinking, your particular specialty. I mean, as you know, I've been with the company a long time, and we started off as reactive and solving people's problems, and then people sort of said to us, "Well, actually, why don't we do this better for all our staff?" And therefore, that's why we're doing it. So often people learn by putting in better chairs that they're a better investment. So that was one thought.
Yeah,
The other thing that I did come across was, so often when I go and see people or see a company, it is they don't make good use of their chairs or any of their equipment. And that can be sometimes because they change it so frequently. So you were talking about training, but actually, if you have a chair in 15 years, everybody becomes comfortable with it and everybody can support each other. Whereas if you have different levers and different, I didn't know this one had tension. Well, so actually the longer the chair is in a business, the less training you need to do. So I mean that did very much thought about it to me. And just one last thought on training was I know a couple of exceptionally good chairs but they are no good for clients because you have to spend time setting them up.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because they are fabulous chairs, but I couldn't recommend them. So I think training is absolutely vital. Anyway, enough of me talking. There's a whole lot of questions. Some of them
Well,
came in advance, and
can
so yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. Can we unpack that final point just a little bit? Because I think it's really interesting and it's forming a because obviously everyone thinks, how do I put the best chair in place possible? How do I put the most functional chair in? Because the best will in the world. I want everyone to be able to tailor this to their requirements.
yeah,
But it ultimately, in many cases, it's an unsuccessful endeavor because there needs to be a investment in setup, and the investment
yes,
in setup means training. And you can train someone fully in how a chair works, but you still have to get them to do it, which is often so challenging. So now what we're doing in an awful lot of the consultancy pieces we're supporting on is figuring out where that trade-off is. How do we how do we navigate between plug and play ability, which is what we're calling a lot of the automation, what's the word? Innovation
the self tensioning type chairs, that sort of thing.
is adaptability for each individual's requirements. And it's very much culture. It's a cultural conversation more than anything. Is how much are we willing to ask our staff to do in order to get this benefit out of the back end? So yeah, it's definitely a consideration that we're needing to approach now more than ever because of the innovative changes
Yeah.
to product development.
Sorry, Scott. I've just noticed a question in the chat.
Mm.
We've been asked about what is a reactive chair, and I apologise for using terminology that we use in-house. A reactive chair, we mean that a chair has been put in place for somebody with a specific requirement. So if somebody comes to us with a back pain and we go and see them and we think that their current chair is not giving them the support that they need, we will put in another chair and we would tend to call that a reactive chair. So I'm sorry for using the industry terminology on that one. So but thank you for your question. Um, so, okay, let's dive in. Actually, one of the first questions that came in was asking us about new regulations, and I think people are updating, the British standards. That's the whole time. There's no specific new regulations, but it did raise a point to us when we were discussing this about so often people ask us what the minimum requirements are for the regulations. And I think certainly I'm concerned by that, and so is Scott, because I think we need to ask a better question about what's the minimum rather than what works for us and our clients and our employees. I'm sure you've got something to say about that, Scott.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the added value that we spoke about there is not going to be achieved through implementing the base minimum. The base minimum hasn't changed an awful lot at all since 1991, really. What has changed is the guidance around selecting appropriate options that meet the requirements of the individuals in the space in question. Um, and it still very much is on the employer to make decisions that are informed based on the criteria that we've laid out today. So you get more value added, kind of the further away you get from those minimum requirements, I'd say. Those minimum requirements don't consider things like sustainability. They don't consider things like cost benefit analysis internally. They are purely a functional guidance as to it absolutely has to do this at a minimum. From there, go off and find value.
Yeah, I think, but I would caution, though, just say you don't always need to go a long way away from the minimum, because one has to look at what you're trying to achieve, and that brings us on to quite an interesting question: is about what are the benefits, drawbacks in the home versus office use? Because the one chair doesn't fit both scenarios, does it?
No, absolutely. From a regulation perspective, because of the domestic requirements for upholstery and foam, first and foremost, so you don't necessarily have parity of spec.
And
Um,
that's relation to fire, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, in terms of fire as guidance. But also you've got the no one has ever touched my office chair. It just so happens I know how to set it up, but I'm in the bottom of my garden at the moment. Probably one of the reasons why my internet signal's so terrible. So sorry if during my presentation it cut out at all. But yeah, no one's ever touched this chair. It's purely on me. So I have the flexibility to maybe have a more adjustable chair that's more tailored to my needs in this space. Because if someone, if one of my kids does come along and push my back angle way too far back, I know where to correct it. Whereas that's not necessarily going to be the case when you're in a hot desking environment with potentially 30 different staff interacting with that chair over a monthly period.
Yeah. No, I think that's for me, again, this comes on to a question we're talking about, the question was, an ergonomic, what's the difference between an ergonomic chair and a good standard operator's chair? Well, I think, as you alluded to in your presentation, the word ergonomic is sort of is used in a strange context. So the ergonomic is, does it fit the person providing them support, and does it allow them to do the task that they do? There's nothing more magical than that. But getting the spec right for the environment and the task and the person is the key to all this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it got lost along the way that ergonomic had functionality um, implications, but really it's not. I mean, you can get a chair with very limited functionality that's very ergonomic for a user depending on what task they're doing. I think what adjustability affords you is I got to be careful how I say this. Flexibility to be able to adjust the standard model to an individual set requirements. The question is whether or not there is also the understanding of what those set requirements need to be by the person adjusting the chair without getting overly complicated. And that's what you're trying to then mitigate with a standard chair option is, do we are we expecting our staff to be able to make those changes, or are we relying on a degree of automation within that chair that means that they don't have to do that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. And that leads me really nicely on into my next question, Scott. What do we do with an ergonomic chair when an employee leaves? I'll leave you to start on that one.
Uh, I mean, hopefully. Okay, so it depends what we mean by reactive. So the vast majority of reactive cases are resolved. This is with my curative hat on. Are resolved with an option that is not made to order for an individual. It's an individual's requirements matched to an existing specification of chair. So there shouldn't be anything wild and wonderful about it. That would be the ideal.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it
so
also fits in with what you're talking about with sustainability too, isn't it?
yeah,
And the fact that a lot of these more adjustable chairs probably are considered to be a higher quality chair will actually have better sustainability, got a bit better ability to swap out bits different height back or different shape back. So actually you may not be able to use the chair completely as is, but with a very small adjustment, it'll be suitable for somebody else.
perfect. Yeah.
So that's great. Um, I've got a great question. Why do manufacturers not include instructions for the operation of chairs and the possible adjustments? Now, I'm sitting at above our warehouse today, and I know about 100, well, 100 foot, just a couple of feet away from me, I've got a colleague actually recording videos to do just that. So, yes, it would be good if manufacturers do, and a lot of the manufacturers do. But yes, you're quite right. Whoever asked that question, we should make sure there is good quality videos and training material for chairs, and I would hope that we certainly do that. Um, Anything to add, Scott, on that one?
No, it was very much a point within my criteria that you should look for. It's part of the whole story because how a chair is used once it's in situ is arguably its most important feature. So most manufacturers have cottoned on to that, and the sustain. Sorry, oh my God, I'm obsessed with sustainability now. The value that what am I trying to say here? Yeah, they've cottoned on to that, and they are the more I don't even want to say premium, but just the more established manufacturers have included that within part of their marketing package. That is less the case when we go for import component chairs. So yeah.
Okay. I've just got another quick one because we've been asked whether we still host DSE assessor training as a one-day course. Yes, we still offer DSE assessor training available. So if anyone wants to reach out to us, we're able to provide that. So we can certainly do that. Um, right. What other ones did we have? What about training available to choose the right chair, Scotty? I think you provided a lot of information within your talk, but how do people learn how to make these right decisions apart from watching this webinar?
Guidance. To be honest, it, there's there's an awful lot of value to be had by people who understand how to navigate these challenges, and there's so many choices to make that by being assisted through that, you can be informed at each stage of it. I think that's probably the key. Manufacturers have got very good at presenting their content, the content of their particular chairs, in a way that's able to be understood, and but there's still the degree of marketing cloudiness, if you like, and also the requirement to potentially have to navigate through 10 different manufacturers' options and portfolios before you then select a product that is suitable. I think being able to sit down with the likes of ourselves, and really understanding what you're trying to achieve, what your kind of must-haves are, and the cultural impact that's gonna, or sorry, the cultural implications will allow you to kind of be, yeah, to make the right choices along the way, have the right options put in front of you, and then guided along the way. Sorry, that's a bit mouthy, but hopefully that works.
Okay. Um, got an interesting comment here about, how do we ask companies to justify a £750 office chair as well as a £750 working from home chair? And then say we obviously have a decent chair in the office and then often not a great chair at home. I mean, I am shocked about the seating that people do have at home. Um, and you're right, quite often people do have fairly good chairs in the office because, of course, the office chairs need to be more flexible, don't they? Because, as you said, different people using them. Um, I would go back to it's really important to know what tasks are being done, where, what the duration is, because no, most people probably don't need to spend the same on a working from home chair as they do in the office chair. I would be concerned if companies were actually, I would be saying that their choice is possibly their choice decision. What do you call it? The questions they're asking themselves are not giving them the right answer. Um, I don't know. Do you have a feel, Scott? This is probably a bit unfair. If they were paying £750 in the office, do we have a thought as to what they might should be paying in home? Just a ballpark guesstimate?
Not really. I would just
No.
say that it's very much an internal decision as to um I mean there's two different questions here. There's a standard model and there's a are we making an adjustment for a reasonable adjustment that requires appropriate intervention in each space, and how much time are they allocating between the two? I think the guidance that we take is usually if they have if the company's objective is to bring people back to the office, which is the trend that we're seeing in a lot of situations, you make that the environment that people want to come to, and all the benefits that go along with it. As long as they are set up appropriately at home in terms of their general posture, which again, you don't have to spend over and above on. Yeah, there's no, I wouldn't imagine there's any real need to go to the same degree.
Okay. I was it was an unfair question, but I thought I'd ask.
Yeah,
Um,
specific prices are really difficult because it all
yeah,
depends on what I mean, you might have a particular, yeah, let's leave it at that.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, leave it there.
yeah, depends on
Yeah.
the kind of organization.
Yeah. Anna's asking us a question. It's always a difficult question, this. Does a is a company obliged to provide a chair at home and the office? I mean, I'll just start on that one. It's a difficult question that we have no prescriptive law that says that. We need to do a risk assessment, which comes back to what is that person doing at home? If they are spending a significant part of their working day inputting into a computer, and their contract, hasn't required them to provide an ergonomic workstation pre-employment, that's a yes, you probably do have an obligation. Equally well, if somebody is going home and they're doing mainly Teams calls or making phone calls, then they may not. So it is a difficult, it is a risk assessment. But I do come back to that thing is it's not about what do we have to do, but what about how do we get the best out of our employees? And that's surely what we want to do is we want value for money from our employees, and if that's making them comfortable at home, the law backs us up rather than tells us what to do. Have you got anything else to add to that one, Scott? It's
Nothing at all.
a bit more in my arena, that one. So
Yeah, absolutely.
um, there's a comment about, we're focusing on getting people back into the office and not working from home. Um, I think really we've covered most of that. Is that the office is a melting pot. We have to make sure there's lots of adjustability to accommodate people, whereas the home we've got a different selection criteria, really, haven't we? But I think it is an open conversation people need to have, and people need to know that their companies are thinking clearly about it, and they're thinking about supporting the employees. Right. So, what else is there on here? Oh, we had a question about advice for taller people. They're saying there's lots of choice for people with wanting taller chairs, but not for the more petite individuals. Do you want to make any comment on that, Scott?
To be honest, this is possibly more in your arena in terms of what that individual needs.
Mm,
Um, so I'll let you start with it, and then I'll
yeah.
add to that in terms of
Yeah.
function.
I mean, it is, I think it can be more restrictive because the mechanisms of the chairs take up a certain amount of space. So the seat pan, the bit you sit on, sometimes there is a minimum size for petite individuals, but we do have quite a lot of experience about catering for people. So if that is something that's of concern, that somebody needs a smaller chair than perhaps the average adjustable or even the ergonomic adjustable can do, we can accommodate them, but that may fall out of the normal range of adjustments that we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we mentioned at the beginning, the European anthropometric data, the AX measurements, gives you a pretty clear indication of what your median sizes need to be. And then from there, it's accommodating accordingly. What I would say is most manufacturers will not have a smaller seat option. What they might have is less travel on the seat slide, but they don't necessarily change the dimensions of the pad itself. Whereas there are the person asking the question was quite right. There are a number that then offer an XL seat pad option or a larger seat pad option than standard. Um, what I would say is on those smaller individuals, it's a case of understanding their particular requirements. Hopefully, they are of a smaller quantity that we can deal with on a reasonable adjustment level.
Yeah. We've just had an additional comment about bariatric chairs.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I think from my perspective, I think, I'm seeing more chairs with a higher weight limit of around 23 stone, as it were. There are much greater options higher up, but yes, I think we are probably going to have to build that into our thinking when we're specing chairs, aren't we?
Absolutely. And it's also just worth, and this might not change the decision making in terms of what bariatric chair to go for, but it's always worth checking to see whether or not that max user weight limit is an independently certified max user weight limit, or if that's a manufacturer self-cert. So essentially, a manufacturer can say, we're willing to take on the risk of this at this weight limit, and that will then impact warranty. Whereas there are independent bodies that will check that is the right dimension from a safety perspective.
And actually, strangely enough, I think people always think it's the gas stems that give, but in my experience, it's the back bars and the arms that often take the wear and tear on higher load chairs. I'm just going to, before we finish, we've got a few minutes, but I just want to sort of come back on the 30-second decision making process that I've certainly seen over the years. You know, people go to a lot of effort to get some trial chairs and everything else, and then people come in and literally sit down for 30 seconds and go, oh, I like this, and then move away. And can I just counsel very much against that being a decision making process? People need to try the work they do because it's like a big saggy sofa. It feels great when you first get in it, but actually after about 5-10 minutes, perhaps you've not got the support. Um, and I couldn't let this go without actually just mentioning that. I'm sure you'd like a few minutes on that, Scott.
Please, please. End user trials are a very variable way of gathering qualitative feedback on a particular chair, especially if the work there it can be more successful if certain steps are taken before it, because you allows you to focus your efforts on what chairs are actually getting in front of those individuals to begin with. I'd always start with a conversation around what we're trying to achieve. From there, you can then have options presented to you to a focus group who are key stakeholders within that decision-making process to say, because an end user will only really care about initial comfort and can I set it to my requirements. That's only two of the credentials on the list of things that we presented to consider on slide 4. There are a number of different things that you can consider as a business that are going to add the value. So yeah, focus group then gets you into a narrowed down list of options that you can then put towards staff to get their feedback. What I would very much recommend is going down the route of we've got an online questionnaire that we use for trials, and it allows you quantitative data that you can break down the reason why a particular chair has been selected from that list rather than leaning solely on qualitative. It tends to be that the person who shouts loudest in the office or who can garner the most amount of support have the option selected that they want. And it's not necessarily indicative of what the whole picture is. So yeah, consultancy, reduced list of options, and some form of online questionnaire that you can pull data from.
Yeah, absolutely. We want user information, we want user buy-in, but it's got to be more than 30 seconds. Oh, that's nice and soft.
Yeah.
So David's just asked a very quick question, Scott, before we go.
Mhm.
Other than a 12-hour on the specification, is there an effective way to identify chairs that would be suitable for a 12-hour shift use?
Yes. So there's an accreditation called BS 5459, which allows for use up to 24-hour space. Now, there are a number of chairs that I would not consider to be appropriate for 24-hour use that still receive that certification. So it very much then goes into how the users in those kind of, that are working those kind of shifts are going to use that chair and the materials that they're made out of. But the only actual certification in terms of BS safety standards is that BS 5459.
Right.
From there, it's experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Scotty. Scotty, we are over time, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to sort of wrap this up. And that's about it. So I'm Joe. We've got beautiful sunshine here. I hope it's that with it there. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye now.
Thanks, everyone.